One more episode before the holiday. Hope all of you listeners to the CBB Central podcast have a wonderful Christmas, but we're going to bring you one more episode before the holiday gets fully underway. We're recording Sunday night, the 23rd, so we're about to go into the basketball purgatory of 4 days where we have to watch the NBA, Brad. I'm not excited about it, but it's a holiday, so I guess you have to get through it.
I mean, we talked about this last time, but the Diamond Head Field being so uninspiring is just such a whiff because, I mean, standalone games. Like today, like the only games, for the most part, like it was Houston, Coppin State, but then we could have had some like real nice day-long basketball. But I mean, URI blows one to Bucknell, and that's not a Bucknell team of years past. Like Zach Thomas and Nana Fooland are not walking through that door. That was a bad loss. And that URI TCU game could have been okay, but now it's TCU Bucknell, which does not have the same luster.
Yeah, it certainly does not. Pretty excited, though, for a potential championship game, Indiana State and TCU. I'm pretty high on this Indiana State club. I watched a fair amount of their game today. Thought they looked really good. Jordan Barnes is terrific. Christian Williams and Cooper Neese give them a little bit more depth, even though Neese hasn't been as impactful as I thought he might be. They've got a pretty good big man down low as well, so maybe a contender in the Valley.
So when they played like a week and a half ago, were Neese and Williams eligible for that game?
I'm pretty sure they were not. I think they were eligible for one game before Diamond Head.
I can check on that too. Yeah. But yeah, both. Well, Williams was a rotation guy at Iowa, but he was forced to play like a lot of point guard, right? And then Neese just, I mean, he didn't even make it a couple weeks, right? He was like one of the first people on this year's transfer list.
And to answer your question, Christian Williams played his first game in that TCU Indiana State game, as did Cooper Neese. So they did play. TCU had no issues in that game. I don't anticipate them having too many issues once again.
We'll see on that neutral court though, instead of being a bye game.
Yeah, and it's also Christmas night. Like, I can't imagine that's the easiest game to get up for. I know it's a championship game, but like some weird stuff could happen. That's all I'll say on that. Pretty good weekend for the Providence Friars, your team, Brad. Not a good weekend for the Northwestern Wildcats, my team. We were playing at the same time. Northwestern had a 9 o'clock game on Friday night. Providence did too. Me and Brad were texting kind of throughout as Providence found a way to win a big one on the road that they desperately needed, and Northwestern found a way to lose a game at home that they desperately needed. Thoughts from that Friday night? I was devastated. I'm not gonna lie. Northwestern had a real chance to beat Oklahoma. Oklahoma, a very good team. Northwestern just didn't make enough shots down the stretch. They were pretty gassed. I can't understand why Ryan Taylor keeps being the guy that Northwestern feeds down the stretch to chuck shots when he shoots like 30% from the field. And not Vic Law, who's been like a legit All-American level player to me. But that's me. Meanwhile, Mekhi Ashton Langford is doing things good for Providence, and Providence beat Texas on the road.
Yes, it's interesting because I didn't even realize that Northwestern Oklahoma game was like super tight until like the very end. Because I was trying to every commercial break and halftime, instead of like being on Twitter, I was trying to catch as much of Buffalo Marquette as I could. But then I saw that that game was super tight while the Providence game was super tight. So I texted you and I was like, "Are you having a heart attack too?" I was going nuts. I mean, you mentioned Ashton Langford who hit a big three. I mean, he was good, right? But just the fact that everyone is talking about how great he played just shows how low the expectations are. Because like he hit one shot, and I mean he didn't. People go, he didn't turn the ball over against the press. Like, congratulations. Like Drew Edwards could have done that too, but he was good. But the people saying that he was great just shows how much the expectations have kind of fallen there.
Yeah, and I mean, I think the biggest thing that I took away was just how important that win was for Providence compared to Northwestern. I mean, you talk about the foil of the games going on at the same time. I mean, Providence just isn't going to have the opportunity. So to get a almost for sure quadrant one win on the road at Texas, over a likely tournament team, that's just a massive win for a Providence team that had the loss to UMass, had the loss to Wichita State. Neither of those will age particularly well. They also have the loss to Michigan, which is fine. But they won't have that elite win chance, whereas Northwestern, obviously in the moment, it's like You blew a game against Oklahoma that you could have won. You already had the chance against Michigan that you should have won that game potentially. You should have probably came away with a win at Assembly Hall against Indiana. You at least should have had one of those three instead to come away empty-handed. But Northwestern will still have a road trip to Michigan State. They'll still have a road trip to Michigan. They'll still have home games against Iowa, Wisconsin. They'll still have a home game against, I believe, they do not have a home game against Indiana. They have a home game against Ohio State. They have they got a road trip to Ohio State. They have Nebraska on the road. Like, they'll have so many quadrant one, and not only quadrant one, but top of the resume win chances. I mean, if Northwestern somehow goes into Breslin Center on the 2nd of January and beats Michigan State on the road, I mean, there's your resume win right there. I mean, you need 2 more quadrant one wins, maybe 3, which you can find on the road in the Big Ten, and you're set. Whereas Providence just won't have those chances. So Providence desperately needed that Texas win, nearly blew it down the stretch, but found a way.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people. I mean, this was before the Texas game, saying, oh, I'm not worried. Providence fans, I'm not worried. I'm gonna be fine. We'll go 10-8 and get in. Like, no, we will not. If we go 10-8, we are not getting in. It's the Big East isn't the same. And I mean, even after this Texas win, the Texas win might make up for the UMass loss, but there's still that horrible Wichita State loss, and Wichita State might be worse than UMass. The game being on neutral court kind of makes it different. But Providence still probably needs 12 more wins, whether it be 11-7 and then 1 in the Big East tournament, or 12 in the Big East. It's kind of it might be an overgeneralization for this point, but 10-8 is not going to get it done. 11-7 probably isn't going to get it done. The only teams in the Big East who can probably get away with going 10-8 is probably Marquette and maybe Seton Hall too.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think 11-7 is the number in the Big East. I mean, I'd be interested to do this before we get into conference play. Maybe I'll do this on one of the days when there's no basketball. It's like, kind of hypothetically, what's the number of conference wins you're likely going to need to get in from every conference? Like in the Big Ten, I think 9-11 probably get you there, or it's going to be close. I think 11-7 is probably a good target in the Big East, maybe 10-8. I think the Big 12, probably 500, maybe one game under 500, probably gets you there.
I think this year for the Big 12, I think it's got to be 9-9. I think that the league is pretty down, actually. I mean, people don't want to hear it. When I suggested it, this one guy was like, "Well, they're still going to get 7 teams in." But if all 7 of them are worse, then the league's down, buddy. It doesn't mean that the league's bad. It means it's worse than it was last year. But I think 9-9 is the target for the Big 12.
Yeah, I think 8-10 doesn't completely eliminate you, but it's not good. In the ACC, probably 500, maybe a game under. SEC, I don't really know. So yeah, I mean, I think it'd be an interesting thing to look at. I might do that, put it on Twitter if I have the time. But let's get into some other action, because we had a lot of stuff go on in college basketball this week. We had a couple of big unbeatens go down in Auburn and Kansas. Kentucky finally put it together. We had the Duke Texas Tech game at MSG. We had Buffalo. I mean, Buffalo played their 2 big tests of the year beyond that West Virginia game, which doesn't look like that much of a test anymore on the road. I was there for one of them. I was at the Dome on Tuesday night against Syracuse, where Buffalo found a way to beat the Orange, and they go on the road to Marquette, and Marcus Howard puts up 40 in the second half, and Marquette pulls away late. I don't know how much of those 2 games you watched, Brad. I watched almost all of the Syracuse game. I watched all of the Syracuse game. I was there, excuse me. And I watched a good amount, actually, of the Marquette game. I was bouncing back and forth in the first half of the Northwestern game, hanging out with some Buffalo fans. So my thoughts, I didn't come away from Buffalo getting blown out by Marquette and be like, Buffalo's bad, or Buffalo doesn't deserve to be here, or they're overrated, whatever. I mean, I don't know a team in the country that was beating Marquette that night. Marcus Howard dropped 40 in the second half. Buffalo played, I think, pretty solid defense. I mean, they weren't great by any means, but I thought they defended Howard pretty well. The only thing they couldn't do was the Hausers and Brennan Bailey are both just longer and more and better shoot and could shoot over the top of the smaller guards for Buffalo. And Theo John was a really impactful player, protected the rim well, kind of neutralized Nick Perkins. But otherwise, I mean, I thought Buffalo played fine. Just thought Marquette was just absurdly good that night. As for the Syracuse game, Syracuse was in control. I thought Syracuse actually looked better than I expected them to. O'Shea Brissett played well in the first half, then kind of went quiet. But Buffalo is just they're as veteran a team as I've ever seen in terms of how they play. Like they give up a 5-0 run on the road in a raucous environment or a 6-0 run, and instead of like panicking, they just go down the floor, find a way to get a bucket, and reset. CJ Massenberg is so clutch. They got off huge offensive rebound after huge offensive rebound. Devontae Jordan hit a big three in that Cuse game. Carruthers is super clutch. Jeremy Harris made a big shot when he wasn't making anything that day. I mean, they just have dudes who know how to play, and they've been there. And I think that matters so much in college basketball on a night-in, night-out basis. Nate Oats can really coach. I mean, I think this is still a top 20 team, regardless of the loss. I mean, I'll probably move them down a spot or two just because, they have a loss now. But I don't think it's a bad loss by any means. I think they look fine against Marquette. Marquette was just awesome.
Yeah, I think that top 20 might be a little too high, but I think certainly the top 25 is fine for Buffalo. I'm going to still have them in my top 25. I mean, they're a good team. Maybe they're not like a top 25 team like some of the teams that I have out of the top 25. If they played on neutral court, maybe like a TCU or Iowa or something, or like St. John's. Maybe they could take them. But I mean, they're a very good team. They're going to get an at-large bid, barring a major collapse, because they have some nice wins already away from home. I saw about half of the Marquette game. I didn't see any of the Syracuse game. I was at Providence, Albany, which was an interesting affair there. But they were impressive. What I saw, I didn't see the Marcus Howard explosion, but yeah, they were doing a pretty good job. I think second half, it kind of changed where Howard hit that pull-up three, and then he was coming off a screen, and they were nowhere close guarding him off the off-ball screen, and he got a three from the right wing. And then I had to go back to Providence game. But Theo John was awesome in that game. He's someone who was terrible last year. I kind of wrote off for this year. He's been very good this season. I mean, the Hausers at the 3 and the 4, they just have so many weapons, and when you have your auxiliary pieces like John and Joe Chartouni playing well, Marquette looks like the clear best team in the Big East. I have them, I think, 21st right now, maybe 20th, and they could seriously rise the polls over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think we're going to have them as a top 20 team in my next ballot. I think for me, the biggest thing was, we talk about that Indiana game early in the season where everybody who was on the Marquette bandwagon pretty much jumped off. It was like, all right, they're still bad on defense. Indiana cut them up. It's over. And it's the perfect example of why we shouldn't overreact to one game in college basketball, because this team that night against Buffalo looked like everything and more we thought it could be. So much shooting on the wing. Marcus Howard going off. Theo John protecting the rim. We thought that might have been Ed Morrow, but it's Theo John. He's established himself really well. I mean, they looked awesome. I think they can easily win the Big East if they can continue to play at this level. The question is, are they going to continue to bring that level of effort on a night-in, night-out basis? Are they going to continue, to continue to hit shots? And if they do, they're going to be just fine. I mean, Villanova has some things to work through. I think they're still right there. St. John's has some things to work through. I still think they're right there as well. But I mean, that top three should be pretty solid. I think all three of those are probably going to wind up in the top 25 by the end of the season. So I think the Big East will be okay. They just don't have any of those elite teams that we've talked about. As for Buffalo, yeah, they're in good shape at large wise. Yeah. I think the number of losses they can handle in the MAC is probably 3. I mean, they have 3 quadrant 1 wins already. They have the West Virginia win, which will more than likely stay quadrant 1, top 75. You have to imagine they'll be there. Syracuse will be a top 75. And then San Francisco on a neutral has to stay top 50. I think they probably stay top 50 in the net based on how much the net likes San Francisco right now. So there's 3 quadrant 1 wins right there. Maybe the St. Bonaventure and the Southern Illinois wins they thought would do a little more than they will. But Toledo could be a sneaky quadrant 1 on the road.
Ball State maybe.
Ball State possibly as well. I mean, that's a good league. So I think 3, maybe 4 losses would keep them in the at-large, solidly in the at-large conversation. But yeah, I think they're fine. They're a really good basketball team. They know how to play down the stretch. They're nerves of steel. I think they'll win the league anyway. But it's funny. You spend the entire season trying to figure out if you have to worry about 3 days. I was thinking about this the other day. It was like Buffalo's going to spend their entire season fighting to be an at-large team just so they don't have to win 3 games in a row. It's pretty wild.
I mean, I was also thinking about this in the context of URI too. Like they take this horrible loss, right, on neutral court. They don't get the chance to play TCU. But at the end of the day, it's like, who cares? Because it's all auto bid or bust, really. So, I mean, you went from being a potential like 13 or 14 seed to maybe like a 15 or a 14 seed in the off chance that you win the 4 games in 5 days, whatever, to win the A10 tournament. So it's like, let's say that URI has like a 5% chance to win the A10 tournament. You're like worried about a potential scenario of a potential scenario. It's kind of like, all right, like we're a young team, like we fucked up, we're not that good. Who cares? Better luck next year.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think it's just like, yeah, I mean, for the vast majority of teams, it doesn't matter. That's why I laugh so hard when mid-major fans are texting me and they're like, our RPI, like why is our RPI low last year? Like this year, I have a Siena fan who is always texting me about Siena's net. They're like, why is Siena's net 250? I was like, it doesn't matter. If Siena makes the NCAA tournament somehow, they'll be going to Dayton anyway. And you should be pleased that they're going. Like, they're not like the only team that your net matters for is if you're like a top 50 team. If not, I don't think it matters in the slightest.
No, absolutely not. And I mean, I'm always kind of interested with like the first 4 of the Sweet 16 teams, because like if I were the committee, I would just be like, all right, typically, like in most cases, maybe the years where NC Central or like Texas Southern has like a big year and they win a lot of games, but most of the time, all right, we got SWAC, MEAC, NEC, and then like a 4th wild card, like for that 4th spot. But I've been surprised sometimes where even teams from conferences that I think are better. Maybe the team was like the 7th or the 8th seed in the conference and they won the conference tournament and then they get sent to Dayton. I just think that if like that were me, I would just be like, all right, let's just send the 4 worst conferences there, as opposed to maybe a team with like a worse RPI in like a better league.
I remember one year Austin P was the 8th seed in the OVC and they won the conference tournament and they avoided Dayton. They played Kansas right out of the gate. I think that was 2 or 3 years ago. That was like Josh Robinson was balling for Austin P. But like, yeah, there's a couple examples like that where it's like, how much do you value just like the conference affiliation and winning the conference versus that? I mean, it's not a huge topic of conversation, but it's stuff the basketball nerds like me and Brad like discussing. So let's keep it moving.
Well, there's one more thing.
Yeah, sure.
I think especially what you just kind of mentioned about Austin P getting that kind of nod to skip the first 4. Two different things. First, that actually hurts them because they could earn a lot of money if they won the first 4 games, because that counts as a normal like NCAA credit. So they can kind of steal some money there. And secondly, I think I've seen this a little bit from like John Gassaway and stuff, but I think that a bracket draft would be unbelievably interesting. And I don't see why it wouldn't work, because it's just you just go down the seed list, right? And then so like the selection committee would pick like the 1 seeds, the 2 seeds, etc. And then like the 1 seed would pick the 16 seed that like they wanted to play. I don't see why that wouldn't work. I mean, it's just the committee telling them where they're going anyway. I don't see why the higher seed couldn't be telling the lower seed where they're going and who they're playing.
I would be a huge fan of that for what it's worth. I mean, I think that would be because you could create like it would incentivize teams to like make the regular season matter. You want a high seed so you can pick which team you get to play. And get to pick, a worse team potentially. If you're like Michigan State and you knew that you thought Middle Tennessee State was awesome, you could purposely avoid them unless you're the worst 2 seed, in which case you get stuck with it. But like, I think that'd be great. I'm very here for this idea.
It would be very interesting for like the 8, 9 seeds, or imagine like the fan base of like last year, like Florida State is like number 1 8 seed, let's say, and then they pick like Creighton or something, and like Creighton didn't want to play Florida State, and Creighton fans think that they should have been like a 7 or an 8, and they should be picking the game, it just adds like so much pop to that 8-9 game. I mean, like kind of like in the NIT when Will Wade, when LSU beat Lafayette, and he's like, this was a 3-6. I thought it should have been more of like a 2-7, and we get these kind of snarky arguments based on seed.
Yeah, I think the only challenge becomes like it's unfair. Like if the fourth 1 seed, let's say, gets sent out to the middle of, like, they get sent out to, I don't know, like the fourth 1 seed Gonzaga, and they get sent because there's only where the 1 seed can go. They get sent out east, and then there's an 8 seed that's like Seton Hall, let's say. That would be unfair that like Seton Hall could then choose that area, that region with Gonzaga potentially on the bracket, and then they could play like a home game. I think that'd be a little bit of a challenge you could work through. But I don't know exactly how it would end up working out.
Yeah, because the fourth number 1 seed kind of just gets sent anywhere anyways. But then like if the 8 seed is also picking where they would go,
right?
That's maybe only the 1 seeds get to determine which one they go in, and then the other one. Yeah, that's a tough one.
We'll have to work out the planning of this later. This could be an off-season pod. I'm here for it. All right. Let's move on. Plenty more to talk about. Let's go back to Wednesday night, North Carolina State and Auburn. I watched the entirety of this game. I'm not very pleased that I did. I was really expecting this just beautiful up and down, spacing threes game. And instead we got Auburn turning it over like 30 times. NC State playing pretty sloppy and letting Auburn hang around, and then Markel Johnson just going nuts. I mean, I was super impressed by Markel. I thought he had a tremendous game. He shot the ball better than I thought he would. Really ran a team and managed the game in a way that was really impressive. Just not impressed by Auburn. It kind of had been coming for them. They struggled a couple games in a row. They struggled with UAB, and they struggle on the other end with Murray State. Granted, Murray State's a very good team with an NBA player in John Morant. But this is really 4 straight unimpressive performances from Auburn, where they play Dayton pretty tight by 10. They go to overtime against UAB. They lose by 7 at NC State in a game that wasn't even that close, really, and then battled to the death with Murray State. I mean, do you think there's any concern to be had with Auburn? Do you think it's more as NC State, found a way to win a big home game, and Auburn, just kind of hitting the midseason doldrum a little bit with some mid-major foes they're expected to beat?
Yeah, so I haven't seen too much of NC State this year, probably because they just played such a soft non-conference schedule. But I watched most of the game against Penn State, and I was able to watch some of this game. I mean, I had NC State top 15 in the preseason, and they just held serve for me. So they were still pretty high up in my rankings. I think they're like 13th right now. To me, this was a pretty comparable matchup because I had Auburn like 8th and NC State like 13th. So these teams were more closely rated together for me than they were for probably anyone else. So I wasn't super surprised by it. And I think if on the surface you just said, the number 8 team goes to the number 13 team and loses, I don't think that would cause any surprise. Kind of similar to like Gonzaga and like UNC. So even though Auburn's kind of been unimpressive playing some tight games, I'm not super worried. The SEC is rather, I guess, top heavy. I mean, the bottom isn't too bad, but there aren't a lot of bubble teams, I don't think. I mean, Florida is probably the biggest bubble team in that group, and like Kentucky, Tennessee, Auburn, Mississippi State, all pretty safe. LSU's probably in between Florida and Mississippi State too. So I think Auburn's going to have enough of a talent level advantage where maybe they could not fault like a 10-8 or like 11-7 or something. So I think that they can still have a strong SEC record. I think that they're pretty much like they're on a higher tier than a vast majority of their conference, and that should keep them safe for a little bit. I think that maybe having them as like a top 5 team in the preseason was a bit of a stretch for me.
Yeah, I guess the concern for me is just, the general sloppiness they've shown in the last few weeks. I mean, they turned it over a ton against NC State. They didn't look good against UAB running their offense. I mean, for a team that's going to play a lot of guards and space you out and have a lot of ball handlers, that has to be that has to be a big concern because you have to that's pretty key. Like if you're going to be a team that's going to space you out and shoot with a lot of guards, you have to take care of the basketball. They haven't done that, and I think that's a pretty big concern for me. But overall, I think they'll be okay. Their guards are still really good. Brown was down in that game; he didn't play very well. Jared Harper was fine. I thought Javon McCormick was actually like very impressive. Way more impressive than I had seen him all year. I think he had his best game while he's been there. Just super athletic, made plays at the rim. Really exciting player. But yeah, I think Auburn's going to be fine, but not a great thing to have those important performances back to back. Definitely something I'll be watching as conference play gets underway. As for NC State, I mean Daniels was huge. Daniels really struggled early on, and he was great in this game. He had I think 15 and 8. Obviously Johnson was great. And I put him in my top 15 after that game. I think I had him at 14, which is super impressive, and I'm excited to see what they can do in the ACC because them, Florida State, obviously then the three of North Carolina, Duke, and Virginia. But I think them and Florida State are the two best teams. Other than that, Virginia Tech right after them.
Speaking of another team that has been playing with fire recently, Kansas. They finally get burned. They played close games with Stanford, Villanova, New Mexico State. Kind of blow I think it was a double-digit lead fairly late into the game against Arizona State. Arizona State's a good team, but I think that there is some concern with this Kansas team, more so of how often that they've been playing with the fire because with Udoka Azubuike out, they haven't gotten much contribution outside of Lawson and Vic. I know Davon Dodson has played well, but his turnover ratio is still like not even 1.5 to 1. I don't think so. They're really looking for additional people to step up. The Mitch Lightfoots of the world haven't really done it. KJ Lawson hasn't. Grimes has still been struggling. Charlie Moore's not as advertised. Marcus Garrett's more of like a glue guy. So they really need some of these auxiliary pieces to take a step forward.
Yeah, it was really the same old story. It felt like Kansas was in control the entire way. That was the weird thing. It was like Kansas was in control until Rob Edwards hit a couple of threes, and all of a sudden it was like, okay, they're losing now. Rob Edwards is huge in this game, and he's really like the next step player for them. He'd been quiet the last couple of weeks. He was dealing with an injury at one point. I know that, but he was just terrific. Arizona State for them to only get 13 and 5 from Lugan Stort, and still win this game, just so massive. Zylan Cheatham was impressive again. But yeah, Kansas is pretty limited right now. Like Dietrich Lawson is balling, but Quentin Grimes is very blah again. Like he's just super mediocre. Dotson's fine. I think he's a very good player, but they're not elite. Vic, when he hits shots, is good. Garrett can't shoot. Like Garrett is a spacing nightmare. I mean, it gets to the point where like Lawson plays on the perimeter, but he can't really shoot from three. Like he's 20% from the year and Garrett can't shoot. Like that hurts your spacing. Like they're not a great space team, especially given the fact that Quentin Grimes is shooting 29% from three. I mean, I didn't think we'd be saying the spacing was a problem with this Kansas team, but that's where we are right now. Despite them playing small with Lawson at the 5, they don't have super deep, as you said, with those guys not getting a lot of bench production. I mean, KJ Lawson played 12 minutes. He was not good. Mitch Lightfoot was fine. David McCormick played, which was a surprise. I mean, I think a lot of people from Kansas had hoped that Charlie Moore finally would break out. He had the 16 against South Dakota in a blowout and then was just super quiet. So I had moved Kansas down to 4 or 5 in my rankings last week. The loss really justifies that. I think I'll have them down at 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8. They just haven't looked the part of a top tier team in college basketball. And the numbers pretty much indicate that. I mean, Haslametrics has them. I think Haslam has them outside the top 10 in just the rankings. I'm going to pull that up right now to confirm that with you all. I know Ken Palm's still really big on Kansas, but they were big on them preseason. So there's still some of that involved. Haslametrics has Kansas at number 26, which to me is far too low. But, I mean, it gives you an idea what the numbers say about this team.
Yeah, and I think in regards to Azubuike, I mean, he has so much gravity in terms of bringing extra defenders, that's also a reason why the spacing hasn't been as good. When you have such a low post threat like that, and besides the gravity, him just being a threat to score himself with his back to the basket. I mean, Lawson's amazing, but I mean, you mentioned Grimes' shooting percentage, but since that opening game, like if we take out that big opening performance against Michigan State, he's shooting 18% from three and only averaging 6 points a game. This is a guy, he's a very stiff shooter. He's not super athletic. He relies a lot on like physicality and kind of craft, which is tough when you're not hitting shots. So they really need him to step forward because Charlie Moore, he had good numbers on a decent Cal team. I think they were NIT. They had Ivan Rabb on that team as well, but in a Jabari Bird. But he's just not necessarily fitting in as much as I think many people thought.
Yeah, no, well, I mean, the whole thing with Moore is he's not a point guard, really. He was like a scoring point who was just playing pick and roll all the time. And there was no way Kansas was going to put him in that context. So he was just going to be an off-ball shooter who couldn't shoot that well. Like, I was down on him coming in. I don't think I was this down, but I think it makes sense when you look back.
Yeah, I think I ranked him as like the 12th best sit-out transfer around there, because I was kind of weighting like the value on it too. So I was thinking, all right, if this guy's like the starting point guard to open the season and ends up being like the sixth man on like a top 5 team, like he has a lot of value. But he's still like the sixth man, but he's just not performing up to par there. In terms of another interesting topic, Kentucky finally puts it all together. Their fans are all collectively back on the bandwagon after jumping off after the loss to Seton Hall. First good win for Kentucky. It's a very good win. Ashton Hagans was great in this game, one of the best defensive players in the country, despite kind of his steep learning curve as the freshman starting point guard. Tyler Hero finally hit some shots. Travis is starting to come along after being pretty disappointing thus far, and then PJ Washington had like a near triple-double. So very impressive showing for Kentucky. Depth is probably still a concern. They really have like a clear top 5, and then quickly is like the sixth man there, but the bench gets thin really, really quick. But very interesting matchup next week against Louisville.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't watch as much of this game as I thought I was going to, just because things came up. It's the holiday weekend and such. But I mean, Kentucky really shot the ball well. That was big. Every time I looked up, it felt like Keldon Johnson was hitting a three. PJ Washington stepped out and hit a big one in a pick and pop, and he was impressive. Reed Travis had his best game by far. His athleticism popped in that game in a way that it really hadn't in the previous game. And Hagans' defense was so big. I mean, yeah, the depth is still a concern, and they're still going to have to shoot it a little bit. They're still going to have to shoot it like this. I mean, they hit 9 threes, saw 35% from out there. And that's what it took to beat North Carolina. I mean, they'll think that just shooting is going to be really important. But, I mean, for them to do this without Quade, who is, one of their better shooters, and that was a big concern. That was pretty big. And for Hagans to really establish himself as the guy, as their point guard, more just as a defensive-minded stopper who's going to bring up the ball and handle it, and they're going to run the offense through PJ and through Keldon Johnson a little bit. Tyler Hero had 5 assists. I mean, it was a balanced effort, shared the ball really well. Just a very impressive win for Kentucky. And kind of a concern for North Carolina is, once again, they don't put together a complete performance beyond that Gonzaga game. What have we really seen from this team?
Not much, because Naz Little has not been as good as anticipated. He's still coming off the bench. He's still very, very wild with his decision-making. I know I saw on Twitter people highlighting a gamble for a steal that put him out of position, kind of showing, it's not Roy Williams' fault that necessarily that Little's being utilized to this point. Like he still has to perform. I've seen a lot of that about people blaming the coaches for like Javon Quinterly, for Quentin Grimes, for Little, like for Mekhi Ashton Langford. I understand, like, you want to root for the underdog, you want to stick up for the player against the big bad coach who makes the money when the player doesn't. But at some point, I mean, you kind of have to admit and like have some player accountability and stuff that it's like use your head. Like it's not always the coach just because you don't like the NCAA's kind of whole makeup.
Right, and it's also like, sure, if you played Naz Little 30 minutes a game, he would be a productive 30-minute a game player. Like his numbers would be fine. He wouldn't be a huge net negative. But obviously, Roy Williams is trying to teach him something. And if Nazir Little wanted to go somewhere where he was guaranteed to play 30 minutes a game and not and just play through mistakes and let him do these things, he could. There's 20 to 30 high major programs that would do that for him. Probably more than that. I mean, I can tell you there's plenty of schools where if he wanted to, like he signed up for Roy Williams and he signed up for a team that has Garrison Brooks and Kobe White and Luke May and Cameron Johnson and Kenny Williams. That's a pretty good starting five. And you have a guy like Sterling Manley coming off the bench. You have Seventh Woods who's been solid. You have Leaky Black. Like they have other dudes to play. And if you put him on Duke instead of Cam Reddish, he would play 30 minutes a game. But would that be good for him? I don't know that it would be. And I think Roy Williams obviously has his player and his team's best interests at heart. I can assure you, no coach is sabotaging their team's success on the season because they don't like playing freshmen. Jay Wright isn't sabotaging Javon Quinterly in order to, stick it to the man and play his old guy Colin Gillespie. Just like Roy Williams isn't doing that with Nazir Little. Nazir Little has things to learn. If Nazir Little wanted to just play through his mistakes, he could have went somewhere else. He chose North Carolina for a reason. I hope he understands that. It appears that he does, and he's bought into that role. Just the Twitter doesn't seem to understand.
Well, I mean, Little was number 3 player in the country. I'm sure he thought he was a lock to start no matter what happened anywhere. So I'm sure that this was such a surprise to him. But it's also, in terms of like the whole locker room and like the team chemistry, like if a player is outplaying, a star freshman, you have to create a system where players can perform and then be rewarded with playing time. Like if Gillespie's outplaying Quinterly a lot in practice consistently by a significant margin, which it seems like is happening, Jay Wright just can't just be like, all right, I know that you've outplayed Quinterly, but we're gonna go and bring you off the bench and have Quinterly start. I'm sure Quinterly would get a lot better if he got starting minutes. I'm sure, maybe next year, if Quinterly kind of played through his mistakes as a freshman, maybe he'd be better off. But I think not only the player that would be benched in the process, but the other players on the team would want to have guys playing that are good.
Right, exactly. I mean, obviously coaches have guys they like more than other guys, and they have guys they trust more than other guys, and you see it every so often. You're like, why does that coach continue to play that guy over
Gigi Gulliman for Steve Alford?
Right. I mean, every guy has one. I mean, if you're a fan of a team, you can run off every year. There's that one dude who just simply plays more than you think he should. Jimmy Patso's guy was Evan Fisher. Evan Fisher was useless for his first 2 years at Siena, but Jimmy Patsos kept trotting him out there every single game. It was, here you go, here's minutes. And last year was Jordan Ash for Northwestern when he was healthy. Jordan Ash would get his 8 minutes regardless of how not effective he was. And this year they've gone away from Jordan Ash. But like, you have guys certainly that you fall in love with, but like, this isn't like you're just playing them over them to just because it makes you happy. Like, obviously Javon Quinterly isn't doing what he needs to practice. Obviously Colin Gillespie is doing what he needs to do. And we'll figure it out. And I'm kind of tired of this debate because it's like every game on like Javon Quinterly played fine against UConn. He was very solid. And all of a sudden it's like, see what Jay Wright has been missing. Like, good, like, give me a break.
It was the same with Ashton Langford. He took a 3-pointer because they were playing 10 feet off him. It took him 10 years to get the shot off. It looked ugly as ugly as a shot can be. It goes in and suddenly it's see, he doesn't dribble it off his foot. It's like, oh, see, look, he's doing these great things. I mean, people will bend over backwards to like make up events in the game to like defend him. It drives me crazy. Like, oh, he drove and made great passes. Like, when did this happen? I've watched every game the past 10 years, and you're telling me that this stuff happened in this game? It's bananas.
Yeah, I think that ends our discussion though of guys playing that shouldn't play and vice versa. Let's touch on Texas Tech and Duke. Took us longer than I thought it would to get to this game. I watched all of it. Texas Tech, came out and they did everything they wanted to do. They kept Duke out of the middle. They let Culver eat, and Culver made some big shots. He was very impressive. I thought he looked like a clear lottery pick to me. I thought he got a little shot happy in the second, but I didn't really think it was his fault that he had, because no one else on Texas Tech wanted to take a shot. Matt Mooney was quiet. Edwards in the backcourt was a little quiet. They didn't have another guy who could go get a shot, and that was the difference in the game. They really slowed. They just really couldn't create offense in the second half, and Duke was able to. Trey Jones was just a pest on defense and very solid on offense. I think it's really good for Duke to play a game like that in a big environment, sold out MSG, on the ropes right before the holiday. I mean, credit, all the credit, I think, goes to Duke in finding a way to win that ball game, especially with Zion out in the final minutes. That's a huge win for them. And I thought it validated Texas Tech. I mean, Texas Tech, a lot of people kind of questioned with the schedule. I mean, I think anyone who was high on Texas Tech was validated in that game, regardless of the final score.
Yeah, I think in terms of where you should rank Texas Tech, I think as long as you have them lower than Duke and higher than Nebraska, I think you can make an argument either way for that. I have them right now at 17. They got bumped by Kentucky and Arizona State, who flung up their rankings for me. But this is still a good team. 17 is 4 or 5 seed. I think if you told, maybe if you told Texas Tech fans that in the preseason, they would be upset with you, but they shouldn't have been. They should have signed up for that. Really impressed with Tarek Owens, how he's played thus far. I mean, he's playing some 4 too, which is super surprising. And then you mentioned Culver as an alpha, and then Davide Moretti's playing pretty well. Mooney's playing. I mean, they're just getting contributions from guys who looked like they wouldn't be contributing this much. Specifically, like Moretti and Owens are the 2 big ones for me. And then Culver's certainly better than I thought. He's a NBA first rounder for sure, and I think that's good enough for Texas Tech could be the second best team in the Big 12. Yeah,
I wouldn't fight you on that take. I mean, I still think Oklahoma's going to be in that mix. I still think
they're good. I watched them play Creighton, and I've officially flipped my stance on the Sooners.
I think if Iowa State gets healthy, as I know Wigginton came back, that's huge. I think they could be pretty good. I think I'm pretty out on Kansas State right now. I think TCU could be right there for number 2. I mean, I think that's your 3 or 4 teams that I like the most beyond Kansas in the Big 12.
I mean, TCU hasn't played anybody though, right? Because they lost to Lipscomb, and I think their next best win is probably either Indiana State at home or SMU, if I'm not mistaken. Because they're not going to get anything except another game against Indiana State in this Diamond Head.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think they had probably hoped to get Colorado, and Colorado's not that good either, and they just lost to Hawaii.
Yeah. Colorado's not good at all. I mean, it's beating a dead horse, but I mean, anyone who criticizes like the Big East or the American this year first has to acknowledge, they have to preface with the Pac-12 as the biggest disaster of them all.
Oh, it's so bad. It is so bad. But yeah, I mean, what did you think of Duke and how they played? Because I mean, I think there was a lot of people ready to, freshmen can't beat up on seniors. When Texas Tech took the lead, I thought people were going to have the takes out and they were going to be ready. But I thought Duke's composure was really impressive, and Trey was obviously super impressive.
Right, because like Reddish didn't hit a shot all game until that was like a minute left. He hit that corner 3, which felt like a dagger of sorts for Duke. And I mean, Zion's is so good. I mean, people want to kind of tear him down because he's the most popular player, the Instagram guy. But he's really good. He's really quick with the ball, super shifty, and moves laterally. And RJ Barrett's the guy who's more of like the power player. I know when you see Zion's kind of build and body, I think people assume that he's just getting by on pure power and like overpowering people. But Barrett's the one that wants to put his head down and shoot these kind of left-handed floaters after a couple power dribbles and stuff. So I mean, Barrett is certainly very good. He's getting the job done, but he's gonna have to clean up that efficiency. And then almost said Tyus Jones, but Trey Jones has also been great thus far. Freshman point guard, certainly different than Duke's last freshman point guard, Trayvon Duvall. I mean, he's just been such a valuable piece, both offensively as like a facilitator and then defensively as like the leader there.
Yeah, I did not expect him to be this good on defense. I think that's the big. I mean, Tyus was not a very good defender, if I recall, out of high school.
No.
When he was at Duke, like he was kind of undersized. Trey's a little stronger. I mean, he just plays really hard on defense, and he's exactly what this team needs as a point guard. RJ still got to work through some stuff. He's forcing stuff that he doesn't need to force. I know a lot of people think of him as a lead guard at the next level, as like a combo, playing some one, some two. He's got to make better decisions if he's going to do that. I think he's fine. Like he's got to not get tunnel vision. I think is the biggest thing. He's so used to being able to get out and run that like when he's in the half court and the spacing kind of jams up, things get a little bit more difficult.
I think moving on to the last game that we'll touch on before we get to some interesting topics, Maryland Seton Hall. I think I'm still on my same side that Maryland's not that good. Because I don't think Seton Hall is that good, to be honest with you. I think that they're a super sloppy team, but they made a great adjustment putting Romero Gill in the starting lineup to contrast Maryland's two bigs. So they went Gill and Sandro, and it paid off. They get the big road win, and I'm not sure Maryland's that good. I mean, they don't have anything I think on their resume yet. They'll have plenty of chances in conference play in the Big Ten, but I would not be surprised in the slightest if we look up and Maryland's like 8-10 or 8-12 and ends up heading to the NIT.
Right. Like, what's the difference between Maryland and Northwestern right now? They've lost every test they've had on their schedule, but you could argue they could have won all of them. They lost by 5 to Virginia. They lost by 2 at Purdue. They lost by 4 to Seton Hall. They lose close games late, and like that game was tough to watch. I watched the final 5 minutes, and it was a tough final 5 minutes to watch because you saw all this individual talent, like Miles Cale, Miles Powell, 2 excellent players. And then for Maryland, Anthony Cowan's great. Eric Ayala is solid. I mean, Bruno Fernando was awesome in this game. Jalen Smith. And yet you watch the final 5 minutes, you're like, how much more sloppy could this get? I mean, it was just not a fun game to watch down the stretch, despite the score. I mean, Bruno Fernando just made so many plays, and Cowan's clutch. But I mean, I think Maryland's a very bubbly team. And while Seton Hall doesn't really, I've never watched Seton Hall and be like, wow. Like, I've watched a fair amount of Seton Hall basketball this year, and I've never once been like, wow, this is a good team. It's like for like half plays where like they'll like make like this great move, and then like Quincy McKnight like fall over, or like they'll like Sandro will do like a great move to get to the rim and then blow the layup, or it's like they have like very short flashes of greatness, except for when Miles Powell went off. But even like in that Kentucky game, like Miles Cale like played pretty well, but he was like 3 for 12 or something like that from the field. So there's always a catch with Seton Hall. Right, but if you look at their resume, it's like win versus Miami. That doesn't mean much anymore because Miami's bad. 5-point loss to Louisville, win over Kentucky, win over Maryland on the road. So you've got at least 2 quadrant 1 wins. You have a win versus Rutgers, who's a power conference team. You beat Miami, another power conference team. Like, they have a really nice resume, but nothing they do is all that impressive. And I mean, I think they'll probably dance at this point, but I still don't know how good they are.
Yeah, I mean, that Louisville and that St. Louis game, I mean, they had both those games, especially the Louisville game. I watched that whole game, and that was there, for the taking. So that's a tough loss, but I don't think any of those 3 losses are bad. Even the St. Louis loss, I wouldn't say is necessarily a bad loss. Could end up being a quadrant 2, maybe even 3. I don't know about the home, how the home quadrant 2s and 3s work out, because this is not super relevant. But they have the Grand Canyon win, which is not bad. Side note that just popped in my head: Hawaii was allowed to play in 2 tournaments this year.
I think they're allowed to play in. They played in technically 3 tournaments, actually, because they hosted a tournament to open the year. That was like a typical, just like 4 teams came out and they all played each other. So Hawaii played 3 games to open the year. They played North Texas, Portland, and Humboldt State. All 4 teams in that played each other. In like 3 games in 3 days, and then they went to the tournament in California, Wooden Legacy, and now they're at Diamond Head hosting again. I'm assuming Hawaii gets like a break. It's like an exception because it's so hard for them to schedule non-con games. Like it would be super hard for them to have to fill a schedule because they either have to pretty much buy teams to come out to them or just play random home and homes and have random flights across the country that would cost them so much money.
Yeah.
Like I don't have an issue with them doing this, but it is a very weird scheduling quirk.
Yeah, because that Portland, Humboldt State, North Texas trio, I mean that's not technically a tournament, right? Because they're just individual games. Like there was no bracketed portion. But then they're in the 2 brackets, and it looks like they were bought by UCLA too, which is a nice check there. I know a lot of people have been upset with Rothstein talking buy games when the teams aren't favored, but buy game is just you get the check. That's what a buy game is, and it's very. John calls it brutal, which I think I'd agree. If you paid a team to come in and lost, no matter how good the team is, because you could have had a home and home for free, but you're implying that either you don't see the risk reward in playing at the other place, or you just don't think the team's very good, and you don't, a road win there would do nothing. So it certainly is a sign of disrespect when the team buys you. So you're giving them the disrespect, you're taking a loss, and you're giving them money. That sounds brutal to me, but apparently a lot of people don't see it that way.
Yeah, no, I saw you fighting with Tristan on Twitter about this. I completely agree. Like, if you
so he's not wrong in that it's not a brutal loss, right? Like if UCLA buys Buffalo and Buffalo beats them, it's not a brutal loss, but they paid money. That's the brutal part. Was you could have had a home and home free. You said, all right, we don't want to return the game. Like you're not good enough. You're not worthy of a return game, and then you lose. So it's like egg on your face. But most buy games, a loss would hurt your resume, and then you just look very stupid.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, it doesn't matter that like the law. Like, I think the argument Tristan had was like, it's not like there's a reason to buy the game other than you're not just buying a win, you're buying the game. But like, I would argue like you're buying the win. I think that's kind of part of it.
He is right though that they do get the ticket sales,
right? Which is the point of a buy game. Like you're gonna make your money back by ticket sales, and then you're gonna win the game. That's the point. But they don't win the game, so yeah. It's
people are seeing John say epitome of brutality and just taking that as the loss was brutal instead of understanding like what the buy game is.
Hold on. Do we have a Rothstein defender on this podcast? Because if so, I'm gonna need a new podcast partner.
I have consistently been the Rothstein defender. I'm the last one on the bandwagon. It's just me and John because he has these like very, very dumb tweets. I don't mind them. I mean, it's Twitter. I just scroll past them. But a lot of people have like this like vitriolic reaction to them, which is it's very strange, I think.
Yeah, I think there's like a certain like college basketball Twitter thing where you like have to hate him and you have to like quote tweet his bad tweets and just like criticize him, even if you don't like totally hate what it's saying. You could just be like, yeah, this is fun. It's kind of the thing you do. I guess that's how I would describe it. But enough about our favorite college basketball writer who's at some Italian restaurant saying how great the food is right now. Let's talk about UCLA because in all likelihood, Steve Alford is done. I mean, can you see a scenario in which he saves his job? mean, they just look pathetic right now.
Nope.
Yeah,
No, I mean
he's done.
Some people are pointing to like the loss of Tiger Campbell and Sharif O'Neal, which they would have been better if they had Campbell and O'Neal, but you can't be like our season would be different if our backup point guard and our sixth man would be healthy. Like you just, even if it's true, that can't be like that can't move you from where UCLA is right now is probably like maybe like the 75th best team ish, 70s. That can't move you from that to where UCLA fans expect in the top 25. Like that can't be a 50 spot difference.
Right. And like the whole thing is UCLA wasn't pleased with what the status quo was, which was bubble. First four last year, first four several years ago, 11 seed like 4 or 5 years ago when they played SMU. Like with the exception of the Lonzo year, they've been terrible. They've been the epitome of a bubble team. And for a program that considers itself, one of the blue bloods, one of the perennial power programs of college basketball, I don't think it matters if they're, an 11 seed in the NCAA tournament. I think you got to move on. And obviously the 2 names that are going to come up, 2-3 names that are going to come up are Fred Hoiberg, Eric Musselman, Earl Watson. Do you have any names to add to that, Brad? I know Jeff Goodman threw out Mike Bray today. I don't really see that, but it's definitely a possibility. Is there a name you think could come out of left field and be a legit candidate here, or do you really think it's those 3?
No, I think you got to ask Mike Bray first. He probably says no, because I mean they've had a strong recruiting class and they have enough young players where they could be really building towards something in Notre Dame. So I think you ask Bray first. He probably says no. Then you go to Musselman, I think. Because he could flip it quick with the transfers. He's known, like you see Shamail Stevenson, quick flip to a Nevada. I think it's just seen as like a safe destination for transfers at this point. So I think he could flip it pretty quick. And then I think third you would go Hoiberg because he's probably the biggest name, right? Former Bulls coach, but he's known to not like recruiting. And I think at UCLA there's a lot of like appeasing to do and stuff where, maybe at Iowa State, you can just grab the transfers. But at UCLA, you probably have to be in higher level recruitments where there's going to be a lot more effort involved there. And then I guess I would go Earl Watson fourth because he was like a terrible NBA coach. People said he was like one of the worst coaches of all time. Even though he was a 10+ year veteran in the NBA.
Yeah, I mean, the 2 names I'm hearing the most are Muss and Earl Watson. I know a few people out at UCLA who want Muss, who don't have enough power to make decisions, certainly, but they go to a lot of games. Like they're very connected to the program, and their consensus is Muss should be the guy. But at the same time, I think Earl Watson's going to get a real strong look. I will say that. I think he's going to get a really strong look. He has the NBA pedigree. He has the UCLA pedigree. I think it would be a horrible mistake. If you can get Muss or even Fred Hoiberg, you have to take those 2 guys over Earl Watson, in my opinion. But that doesn't mean that's what they'll do. Now, I will toss out something I tweeted out. And I don't know how feasible it really is because there's obviously a lot of concerns and a lot of questions that would come with it. But Earl Watson worked with the balls on the JBA. LaMelo's still looking for a spot where he can be at a blue blood, where he can, be a star. He'll probably be the best player available by, April when Earl Watson would take over. LaMelo and UCLA back together as one. Who says no?
That'd just be too funny. It would put LeVar back in the spotlight. I'm ready for it. This whole, we never paid LaMelo. I mean, maybe they like on their payroll, like maybe their accountant can show that no checks were issued to LaMelo, but feels like kind of a weak alibi there. Like the dad saying that, I just never paid him as I'm pocketing all this money from my sweatshirts and shoes and whatnot.
Right, and like regardless of the payment, I mean, he negotiated multiple professional contracts. Who did that? He has an agent who is like very prominently featured on TV. I would imagine he's been involved in that. Plus the signature shoe. I mean, I don't see a way where he's eligible other than the NCAA just being like, screw it. He is really good and really fun, and we should keep him around. But
it's definitely in their best interest to keep him around. But in terms of kind of pivoting toward kind of like the Musselman stuff, just for a second.
Sure.
So Nevada fans should be angry. They should be yelling at their phones and laptops when people mention Musselman as a candidate, even if it's true, because the implication is that your program is not good enough to keep him. Right? I've seen a lot of people in this instance where it's like, oh, you should be happy that we're mentioning your coach because it means that like you're doing a great job. Like, no, you shouldn't be happy. It's very condescending, right? To be like, oh, like you're doing a nice job. We'll take him from here, right? Even if it's true, you don't want to hear that if you're a fan of that program. Secondly, the kind of ramifications of like what would happen if he were actually to leave. It would set your program back. I can't think of a single instance where a program was definitively better off after losing a coach like that.
Right.
Even teams that continue to do well, like a New Mexico State, they lose Menzies and they lose Weir, but they keep it rolling. They're not better off. They've just kept it the same. And in most instances, you're going to take a bit of a dive even if it's only temporary. So I think fans have every right, and they should be angry when their coaches are mentioned in these searches.
Right. I just don't get the take that's like, why would he leave Nevada? UCLA's expectations are crazy. He's got it rolling at Nevada. Like, why would he leave? And like, I got a DM from a Nevada fan about it, and he just wanted to talk. Like, why would he want to leave, and why would he want to stay? And so I kind of listed it out, and I'll try to read my thoughts out here on the pod. So basically, like, why would he leave? It's not just UCLA can pay him more money. These coaches are just like they're like any other person. They're competitive people who want to get to the top of their field, but especially athletes. Athletes want to they want to make the NBA, and they want to be the highest rated players in the NBA. Coaches want to be the highest rated coaches in their profession. UCLA is a highly rated position. So first of all, I mean, he wins a national championship at UCLA. He's an all-time great in college. He will be considered an all-time great if he goes to a Final Four in Nevada. Wins a championship at UCLA, competitive for more at UCLA. Like, he is one of the all-time greatest coaches in college basketball. He'll be in that discussion. He won't be like the best, but he'll be in the discussion. He'll be a Hall of Famer, etc. He had to spend 3 years recruiting Jordan Brown to get him at UCLA, or to Nevada. At UCLA, he'd be a backup plan. He could just waltz into the room in May and be like, Jordan Brown, we want you, and he'd have a very good chance to land. Like Kyrie Walker, now he's spending all his energy on Kyrie Walker. He's got no problem if he wants him there. Huge recruiting budget, huge charter budget to fly to every road game easily. Like you can do anything you want at UCLA. Why would he stay? Like, he's happy and he has full control of that program. At UCLA, like, no one is going to come to him after a game at Nevada and ask him, why some guy's not playing, or why this guy isn't doing this, why he's not recruiting this kid. At UCLA, he's going to have boosters on his back. Why did he not leave Cal? Why did he not leave for Cal 2 years ago? Because he didn't think Cal was a place where he could build it the way he wanted to. Like, the money wasn't there. There's stuff with California state schools getting weird about athletic spending, and the Pac-12 money is the problem. Like, I mean, that's a big deal, those things. Do you want to jump on with a program that has crazy expectations but gets $20 million less a year from their conference than Big Ten programs do? Like there's reasons not to leave for UCLA, but miss me with this idea that being at Nevada is a better situation because he made it a top 10 team. I saw a tweet that was like, why would he leave a top 10 program for UCLA? Nevada's not a top 10 program. They're a top 10 team 1 year. They're not a top 50 program in college basketball. They were 9-22 4 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, Musselman would have the ultimate job security if he stayed at Nevada, but some guys, that's something that like will they'll have like this hot run as like the mid major and then not go for the higher job, and they'll stay and kind of ride like I'm happy, I'm successful, I have all this job security. But then it's a person by person case, because other guys will jump. And I think you'll certainly make more money at UCLA. UCLA is undeniably a better job, right? There's just no way around it. But the expectations are super high, and there's a chance if like you go to UCLA and you don't live up to expectations, it's quick 3 years and you're out. But you collect a nice paycheck, and then you're back looking for another job, probably a little bit lower level. So it's a risky play, but there is a lot of upside, as you mentioned, in terms of legacy and being competitive and trying to get to the highest level as consistently as possible.
Yeah, I mean, if I must, I look at it seriously. I have no idea if I'd take it. I haven't been in a position where I would have to make that decision. It'd be a horribly tough decision, but I mean, I think you have to consider it if it's offered to you. We'll see if it is. Earl Watson's in the mix. Fred Hoiberg's in the mix. It'll be a developing story throughout this college basketball season, and we will have you covered on the pod with plenty of analysis as we get more information. But it looks like Steve Alford is on his final days, final months as the head coach at UCLA. I mean, at some point, like, are you surprised if he makes it through the season?
I'd be shocked.
Like to make a statement and fire him mid-season.
I would be. Oh no, I don't know if they would fire him mid-season. I'll go with no, because I think the last relevant team that did that was UNLV with Dave Rice, right? And they didn't end up with like a better hire, right? Because it was Chris Beard, and then he bounced. So they didn't end up any better off if they had just hired him at the end of the year, unless it just gets so bad that they just get so fed up that they just fire him.
At least you can make a statement. I don't think you're going to make a better hire unless you're hiring Earl Watson and you want to let him get like recruiting. If like the idea is like we're going to get Earl Watson anyway, like we might as well get him out and like get him to start recruiting and like building a staff. Like that's okay. Like I buy that, but like you're not going to be able to hire Musselman on February 28th. Like he's still not going to want to deal with it. So it's more just like, let's make a statement that we're pissed off at you for being a bad coach and like show our fans that we care. That's all you're really doing.
Agreed.
So we'll see.
No way he's going to be the coach next year. But then moving on to our last topic, it was announced that the Big East, essentially all-star team, will be playing in the Pan Am games this year. If you guys remember, 4 years ago, Mark Few was coach of that team. It was a mix of like fringe NBA veterans and then college players. So it had like Ryan Hollins and Anthony Randolph, and then it had like Denzel Valentine and Taurean Prince and Melo Trimble, a few other guys who ended up making the NBA too. So it's an interesting team, and we just wanted to go through and kind of predict how the team would shake out.
Yeah, so I mean, I think if this is a team where you're just picking the 12 best players in the Big East, like I don't know if there will be reasons why guys won't play, but just kind of assuming like who's going to be back. I think the biggest three questions of draft guys I had was Kamar Baldwin, Shamori Pons, and Marcus Howard. Like how confident are you in each of those guys staying in school?
So first I just wanted to bring up that I think with this being presented as like the Big East team, I think each team is going to have at least one player on the team, and there'll be probably two players that are like wild card players, if you will. But in terms of your draft questions, I think Pons is gone. I think for certain. Howard is on the fence, I think, and I think Baldwin will be back. So in terms of my roster, I put Howard and Baldwin on here and not Shamori Pons.
Okay. Yeah, so if you're going to go through team by team, the hardest is DePaul, right? I was thinking Romeo Weems would be your guy.
I don't know if a freshman can do it, though, because it's over the summer.
Well, they'll sign in June. He'll already be signed, though. And he can enroll early. He can enroll in June and then do it. So maybe Romeo Weems. If not, like, I have no idea.
I went with
Gage.
I went with Darius Hall.
Okay.
The Arkansas transfer. I could also. I'm not as familiar enough with Paul Reed. Like he doesn't play that much. He seems like he's an active kind of rebounding type. If he were more of like a versatile defensive stopper, I think it would be his spot to lose because I think that they could really use a guy like that on this team. But
he's not good defensively. He gets lost a lot.
Then it's Darius Hall for me. I could
be Coleman Lands.
What did you say?
Coleman Lands as a shooter.
No, I don't. I think that they're much better guards.
Sure, but if you're just putting a guy on the end of the bench, if you're going to go team by team,
I think that they would still go with one of like the more versatile guys.
Sure. All right, I'll buy that. I mean, who else is tough? I think Xavier's Najee Marshall, right?
Yeah, I think Najee Marshall because of the versatility. I think preseason you could have made an argument for Quentin Gooden, but he has not played well. Even Marshall hasn't played well, but being able to play the 3 and the 4, I think that's Marshall's spot to lose. Another tough one is Villanova.
Ooh. Yeah. I mean, Sadiq Bey's versatile, but I think it's probably maybe I guess Gillespie is probably their best returner next year.
Yeah, I went with Gillespie too, but could be that Villanova is not going to be so hot next year either. I mean, they're going to be super young. I mean, probably Jeremiah Robinson Earl and Brian Antoine both probably start for them as freshmen, being 5 stars. Robinson Earl would be a good fit on this team, being he played U18s and he was very good as that small ball 5 who could, who was very mobile enough to kind of play that new look. So he's an interesting option too.
If you're building a team because there's so many good guards, I mean, you could argue that Bey is probably the fit though.
Yeah, I could certainly see that, especially when you factor in the wild cards. So first, I just picked my one from each team, made it into 2 lineups, like a starting and then a second unit.
Sure.
And I put a few. For me, there were 5 different options for those last 2 spots, and if you were to go guard for 1 or 2 of them, then Gillespie certainly wouldn't be used.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, because I'm thinking like if you're picking, I think St. John's is the best fit to have 2 guys come out.
St. John's could even have 3 guys too.
Right. Well, if Pons is back, you could do Heron, Pons, and Figueroa, no problem.
And then Justin Simon.
Too. He's been quieter this year, but
versatile guy who can defend, who can pass as like a glue guy. That would be a real nice fit as well.
Right. I mean, the question is everybody going to play? Because if everybody's going to play, then yeah, you're going to be loaded. I mean, if not, I mean, you start to maybe get some of the less like talented guys if not everyone wants to do it. Like you could get like you might get like Simon might be your only St. John's guy, or like Marquette, you might just get Joey Hauser because he's young and could use the experience. Providence probably send Reeves if you can, right? But Diallo is the best player.
Yeah, you got to send Diallo.
But it depends. Like, do you want your best players, or do you want guys you want to develop? Like, if I'm Providence, if I could choose who I'm sending Reeves and Duke because they're my young guys who I'm trying to teach. It's like an international trip. Like, you want to get guys more practices.
But this isn't like one teams, right? Like, this is like representing the conference. I think that they're going to try to win.
That's fair.
Yeah, because I mean, Diallo can play really 1 through 4. I mean, he's certainly in terms of like his mixing and matching and his defensive versatility, he's someone who I think has got to be on the team.
Yeah, I mean, he's the best. Yeah, he's a very good player. Like, assuming he stays, which he will, I would assume. But you never know.
I think so.
Georgetown could be tough.
I went with Omer Yurtseven.
Yeah. He hasn't played a game, but yeah, he's probably the right fit. Otherwise, you're just going to send one of the guards, Akinjo or Mac McClung.
Yeah, I was thinking Akinjo for my second one, but normally you would think like if you were asking this question in the preseason of this year, I would bring up maybe Blair and Pickett, but both those guys have fallen off considerably this year.
Josh LeBlanc has been good. He could be like a useful versatile piece.
Yeah, that could be a nice fit too.
Miles Powell is your guy, I would assume, for Seton Hall.
Absolutely. For Marquette, it was Marcus Howard. But if he's not, then it would be clearly Hauser. And then Hauser would clearly Sam Hauser would clearly be one of the wild card players as well.
Yeah. this seems like a very fun summer event that we're going to overreact to, and I'm very excited about it.
I think another sure thing. So this is the last team that we haven't touched on, right? Because Kamar Baldwin for Butler, obviously, but Creighton. I think Martin Krompel would be a great fit. He's mobile. He's a lob target. He can, he's a fairly versatile defender. I think he would be a great fit as a starting center for this team.
Right. You don't really need guards, but Tyshawn Alexander's been so darn good. I mean, he's 17, 3 and 3 on good efficiency. I mean, he's shooting 45% from three. I mean, the fact that he'd be a really good fit for a wild card player, or Krompel would be your wild card player, because you got to give Alexander your best player, and then you send Krompel as like a useful piece that fits the system. I actually would not be stunned if they don't send a player from every team, although they might.
Yeah, because
if you're looking at the best team, like DePaul's out, great. Villanova might be.
Yeah, because I think that Alexander would be a great fit on the second unit over Colin Gillespie. Like he would be a better fit. Gillespie's not a bad fit per se, but Alexander would be really good. In terms of like my starting lineup, so I went with Marcus Howard, Miles Powell, Mustafa Heron, Alpha Diallo, and Krompel, which I don't think that's a great fit of a lineup, but it certainly has a ton of offensive firepower, especially from beyond the arc. And then I think Krompel's a great fit there at center.
Yeah, that'd be a good lineup. I had not made my lineup based on just everybody. I was making just the 12 best players that would kind of fit together into a roster. So I'll kind of go on the fly. I mean, if you're going to do a big, I think Yurt 7 would be probably the best big you're going to get. And then I'd go Howard at point guard for you. I think Diallo would start, Mustafa Heron, and then Miles Powell. And then you could bring like Baldwin, Hauser, Tyshawn Alexander. I guess you're stuck with probably Paul Reed for DePaul, which kind of stinks, but it's DePaul. And then, yeah, Krompel. And then I think I'd grab LJ Figueroa because he's so versatile.
Yeah. So my second unit was Baldwin, Gillespie, Marshall, Hall, Darius Hall, and then Omer Yurt 7, because I'm, to this moment, I'm still very conflicted on these two wild cards. I think Hauser's got to be on there, in which case he would play over Darius Hall. Then the last spot, I mean, you have Figueroa, Simon, Tyshawn Alexander, and Reeves. I think either Simon or Figueroa is probably the best fit, but I think Alexander's probably the best player.
Yeah, I think that's pretty fair. I mean, I love the
Figueroa for the last spot instead.
All right, that works. Anything else on that before we just rattle off a couple of picks? We don't have a ton of games to pick because it's a quiet week, but we're going to pick some Diamond Head Championship game, and then we'll pick a pretty busy Saturday.
Yeah, we kind of have to wrap it up soon, so let's get right into the picks.
All right.
So you want to do 3 each?
I mean, we could just pick them all, right? We have 7 on the list. We might as well just pick all 7.
Cool. Okay.
So we're going to assume here that TCU beats Bucknell. They're up by 5 in the first half. I'm pretty confident TCU wins that game. I'm pretty confident they beat Indiana State to win Diamond Head, but Indiana State could surprise me. But I'll pick TCU.
And with TCU too, TCU won by 20 the other day, and I think that they'll have no problem.
Kentucky-Louisville, big rivalry game always after Christmas. This is going to be a fun one. I think the way Kentucky played, it's either they come out with a huge letdown and Louisville wins, or Kentucky wins by 15. I think I'll go with Kentucky.
I'm also going with Kentucky. I'm not convinced that Louisville's that good either. I mean, they have that Michigan State win. They have a road win at Seton Hall, but it's just the roster for me. I think that guys like Christian Cunningham and Enoch and even like a Jordan War are going to start coming down to earth a little bit. So I'll go with UK as well. Third game, Butler at Florida. Butler won the first matchup. I'm going to take them for the sweep here. It'll be a big win for them. Kind of set them on the right track after blowing that Indiana game. I haven't seen too much of Florida since their Butler game. I think that they've started to kind of turn around a little bit against weaker competition, but they're going to need their veterans to really take that step forward that people, myself included, thought that they would coming in.
Yeah, big bubble game. Florida at home here. I think they got to win it, and I think they do.
Game 4, interesting game between mid-major power Belmont. Just got that nice win. Yeah, I'll say at the buzzer. It was pretty close to the buzzer against UCLA. Now they have Purdue, who has been kind of up and down thus far. So Kevin, who do you have in this one?
This game Purdue has to have once again. But Belmont will push them, really test their discipline. But I think in the end, Purdue at home is really tough to beat. They find a way at Mackey.
I go with Purdue too. I think people are a little too hung up on the quantity of losses here. I think Purdue is a fine, like top 40, top 45 team, bubble team, but I think that they'll get the win here at home.
And then some conference play. Seton Hall and St. John's at the Prudential Center in Newark. St. John's, this is their biggest test so far of the year. I think they find a way on the road to beat Seton Hall, but it won't be easy.
I'm going to go with Seton Hall here. St. John's is another team that has just been playing with fire. Seton Hall very up and down. I can see the Pirates getting us like a 20-point lead here, and then they're coming down to the wire. But I'll go with the Pirates to ride this momentum.
Other conference game, Xavier and DePaul. DePaul hosting that one. Xavier doesn't really feel like they have much of a bubble chance at this point, so not a huge game in terms of relevance other than try to stay out of the bottom of the Big East. I think DePaul actually wins this game at home.
I want to go with DePaul, but their tendency to literally give games away is worrying me. That end of the Boston College game was something else.
It was pathetic.
That was a collapse of epic proportion.
You inbound the ball up 1 with 40 seconds to go, and you just throw it away. Then you go down the floor the other end, like don't execute. I mean, it was so pathetic.
I'll go with Xavier. I think DePaul gives away another one. And lastly, Davidson UNC. I think UNC for sure.
Yeah, I don't know if Grady's back yet. I hope he is. Just make this a game. Otherwise, I think UNC wins it big.
And that's it, right?
I believe that wraps us up. Yes, indeed. So, hope you all have a wonderful holiday if you're listening to this before Christmas. If not, have a happy New Year. We'll probably get to you one before the New Year with another Sunday edition breaking down what happens next weekend. Conference play will have started by the time we come to you next. Then all the other conferences get in terms of the power leagues, get underway shortly thereafter. So it's an exciting time in college basketball. Starting to really have resumes. Starting to really get excited for hopefully a fun March and a fun conference season. Thanks for listening, and I hope you all have a great night and a great week.